Over the weekend, I have been thinking about my old Saturn a lot. I went out this weekend to vacuum my new Saturn for the first time. Yeah, I know it's weird. I've been driving it for almost a year and a half now, and I'm finally vacuuming out the inside for the first time. Now, granted, like most of you, I haven't been driving much the last 6 months, so it hasn't had as much dirt in it as it otherwise would, but I felt that it was time to sort of spruce it up and tidy it up. So I knelt down on the ground to vacuum up the floor mat in front of the driver's seat and noticed something rather fascinating. That since I took these floor mats out of the old Saturn, there was still some of my dog's hair on the floor mat. And I thought about it and thought, this means that technically speaking, he has actually been in that car with me, or at least part of it has been in that car with me. I miss the old Saturn. It was uncomfortable and not able to pass smog and was old and looked like it had leprosy. But I kept that car for many years because it was a tangible physical reminder of God's love for me and his hand in my life. And I wanted to relay a few experiences that have come to mind this week. It reminded me of those experiences, and that's why I held on to it. One I remember early on, shortly after I was divorced. I was driving out just north of Berlin, Nevada, on my way to see some ghost towns, and I'm driving along this dirt road that's basically only wide, just barely wider than a single car. And I'm headed out to this ghost town. Can't remember where it is. Should have looked it up. Didn't. But I had already had an instance where I'd come across a car and we came at odds, and there was some, finagling required to get past one another. So I came to this place where the road went up to the top of a ridgeline and I couldn't see past it. So I decided that I was going to drive till I was just shy of it and then stop, and then get out and walk up to the top and make sure everything was clear. I don't know why I had that thought. That was not like me. I was in my mid-20s, 26, 27 years old, somewhere in there. And there's no reason why that's something that should have come to mind, and yet I did. And I walked to the top of the ridge, and just past where I could see, the road had actually collapsed into the mine. And if I had continued to drive up that ridge, I might have driven and fallen down with the car into the mine. But nothing happened, because I listened to an idea, and I believe in that instance my life was spared. Or at least I was spared from the trouble of being stuck out there where nobody knew exactly where I was and nobody would know where to even start looking for me. On a subsequent trip, also out near Berlin, because I'm a cheapskate, decided I was going to take an alternate route back so that I wouldn't have to buy gas in Middlegate for, I know this seems silly, it was like $2.98 a gallon. But that's because in Fallon it was $1.70, and I'm like, I'll pay $1.70, but I'm not going to pay $3 a gallon to buy gas out here in the middle of nowhere. So I decided to take this alternative route back, and I was going to drive up through the mountains and take US 50, the loneliest road in America, back. It follows the Pony Express route, and then I could see some maybe Pony Express sites along the way back to Fallon. So I took this alternative route. On the map, it showed a 4-way intersection. When I got there, it was actually a 6-way. So I took the one that I thought was the right one. Turns out I did pick the correct one, but that was only the beginning of my troubles. I didn't realize that in September, because of where I was and the elevation, that it was possible to already have snow. So very shortly after that, I got up above the snow line. And I had just decided that it was time to pull over and put chains on the car when I slid off the road and couldn't get back on. I don't recall exactly how long I was there, probably because I didn't look to see how long I was there. I tried things. I tried shoveling out underneath the car. I looked for stuff. I tried to still get the chains on anyway, but I couldn't move more than a few inches in the snow because I just had no traction. It was pretty thick and pretty squishy. It was, off-road, and a Saturn's not all that heavy. It's about 2,900 pounds empty. So it just wasn't capable of it. I remember I had a piece of cardboard in the trunk. I pulled the cardboard out. I was exhausted, a little frenetic, nervous. And I knelt on the cardboard in the snow and I prayed. I remember I got up, walked around the car, made about 2 complete circles, and right then and there, a guy came around the corner in a truck. I believe with all my heart this was an angel of God. And the reason I believe that is because to this day, despite my great memory, I could not describe him to you to save my life. All I could tell you is that it was a man and he was in a white truck. I don't know if I would recognize his voice, and I would not recognize his face. He grabbed a shovel, he handed me a saw, I cut some branches off a tree, we put him down in front of the wheels, he dug out some snow, and he pushed me up on the road, helped me get my chains on, and he followed me for several miles, and then he just disappeared. And I knew that day I had been rescued by Providence. It's possible it was just a guy who was inspired to answer my prayer. I have never had a prayer answered that quickly in my life. The third experience, there's 2 more. The third experience I'd like to express is about 10 years ago. I had recently returned from the last time I saw my ex-wife in court, and I was driving home from work one day and 2 tires blew out on the same side of the car, on the driver's side. And if you've never had a tire blow out, 1's bad enough, 2 at the same time, super bad. And the car, I knew something was wrong, so I'd slowed down a little bit. I was still going about 55 miles an hour, and the car jackknifed to the right, and I drove headlong towards the concrete barrier that marks the end of the freeway, because our freeway is in sort of a bowl like this, where it's depressed below the city. And I remember as I was driving towards the wall, thinking, am I ready to die? And a voice in my head said, don't worry about it. And I don't know exactly why the voice said that, what it means, but I do remember bouncing off the wall. Now, if you don't know a lot about how a Saturn is built, Saturns are built so that when you collide with something, the front end collapses and absorbs the damage before you hit whatever the object is. So the fact that I bounced off the wall is phenomenal. Here's the rest of the story that's phenomenal. There was so little damage to the car that I was able to drive the 18 miles from work to where I was living at the time. And even though I'd had 2 tires blow out, I remember distinctly driving home after my tires blew out, which is not possible. I only had 1 spare. But I remember that voice. Don't worry about it. I've pondered many times what that might mean. The last story I'd like to relay is, it was a hot night at the end of August or early September 2012. It was on a day I was feeling particularly low, particularly unworthy. I had just left campus and I was driving up the hill on the freeway on my way home. It's about 20 miles. And I had the window down because I'm a cheapskate and I don't have AC in the car to get a breeze going and cool myself off. And there was this awful odor. And I looked out the window to my left and there was a semi-truck coming up beside me. And I felt like I should slow down and pull over. And because of my experience a couple of years earlier that I just mentioned, 2 years before that, I thought, oh great, I'm going to have another tire blowout, so I'd slow down and pull over so I don't crash into the barrier again. Well, it wasn't about me. As I started to slow down and followed the prompting. As the semi-truck passed me, I looked over, and apparently he must have had a retread on his cab because there was a circular flame in his wheel well. And as the truck pulled in front of me, because I'm slowing down, it started throwing molten rubber. And when I sold the car last year, it still had a few places on it where the molten rubber was still visible from that night, 7 years earlier. And so it threw rubber, and then the tire came flying out of the car, out of the semi-truck went across the freeway in front of me, and the truck then jackknifed in front of me. And if I had been driving the speed limit still, he probably would have pushed me into the side wall. And I know this happened because a day or two later, I guess it was 2 days later when we next had class, there was a student behind me who was also driving at the same time who watched this. And I remember because I gave him crap about not checking to make sure I was okay. But my life was spared that night. And I don't know why. The 8 years that have passed since then, I couldn't tell you why God loves me or looks out for me or cares about me. But he gave me a dog. He gave me that car. And he blessed my life for some reason. And I kept that car in part because I could go out and run my hand along it and remember times that God had protected me and spared my life that were associated with that car. I know there must be others. Some of them I probably don't even know happened. Things that I wouldn't have recognized, maybe. Or that because something happened with the car, something didn't happen somewhere else, and so he protected my life. But I hung on to my Saturn because it was a reminder that God loved me. And I wanted to put these in a video because I know over time that without that physical reminder, the memories will go dim. Without the reminder of things we as people forget. And we have to be continually reminded, usually by trials, that there is a God and that we should turn to him and repent, and make a better effort. But because I had that car, I had a reminder of times God had loved me, that I knew my life had been protected. I still thank God for that car every day. Just now, driving back tonight, I patted the roof and said hello to our friend and thanked God for the dogs and cars with which he's blessed me. I hope that there are tokens in your life, memories in your life, instances in your life where you have seen God's hand. Like Henry B. Eyring admonished us a few years ago, write down these spiritually defining moments and remember them. Share them with others if they're not too personal, that you think they might make a difference in someone else's life. They made a difference in mine, and they've enabled me to be an influence in the lives of other people since then, which might not have otherwise happened. I have not seen God, but I have seen his hand in my life. And I testify to you that if you are trying to do what is right, and if you are looking, you will see it in yours too. And you will hear a voice behind you that says, this is the way, walk ye in it. And if you listen to that voice, you will arrive in a better place and benefit from his love more than you have up to this point. Godspeed and good night.